So we'll talk about the power of saying yes versus the cost of saying no. And when we ask you to say yes, what we're talking about is saying yes to youth jobs, getting young people into the economy and why this is so important. I'll start with this picture. Our economy is pear-shaped, literally and figuratively. Literally, someone likes my jokes, thank you. Dad jokes. Literally, we're pear-shaped because if you look at our population demographic, we've got this bulge in the 15 to 34-year age group. It's a really critical age group from an economic standpoint, and when you've got this bulge, it's usually a really good thing because you have lots of young people coming into the economy, and these young people are supposed to become productive, and you get this uptick in growth. But the opposite happens when young people don't find themselves in pathways into the economy. And then we have what we call a demographic liability and not a dividend. If we look at the youth unemployment rates, they're exceptionally high, highest in the world, we're being told. This number is actually 55.7%, the most recent one. And so if we look at this demographic bulge, there's only a tiny bite of participation in the economy of these young people. And this is one of the reasons why. If we look at this slide, it is the cover of Time magazine from about 3 months ago. I'm not sure how many of you saw it, but it very embarrassingly labels us as the most unequal country in the world. And this creates a stickiness to the unemployment problem because people who are born on one side of this Rawlsian fence have poorer educational outcomes, health outcomes, and economic prospects. This is a number that surprises a lot of people because we have grads. How many grads in this room who are on Twitter, and you have data, and you have a big voice, and you tell the world that grad unemployment is the biggest problem? Well, it's not. Actually, the biggest unemployment is 56% of youth entering the labor force each year. It's about 1 million young people entering the labor force. 56% of them don't even have a matric certificate. You try getting out there and getting into any opportunity, and you don't have that currency. You are quite literally locked out. And so if we talk about the previously disadvantaged, I don't think that's a fair statement to make. We need to talk about people who continue to be disadvantaged well into democracy. So there's structural issues. So we looked at this line between township and legacy economies that are spatially distant. But we also have this structural piece we need to understand. If you look at this graph, it looks at GDP on the blue bars, the South Africa ones done in orange to highlight it, and the circles that you see are employment. And what you'll notice about South Africa is we are closest to Russia. When our GDP goes up, our employment numbers don't go up. 67% of GDP is services economy. If you look at financial services company, do they grow with people? They don't. They grow with algorithms. I mean, we're seeing this playing out in market right now. Automation, robotics, those are the things that reduce employment numbers or the number of people coming into the economy. And semi-skilled and low-skilled labor have no place here. So if I'm going to summarize all of that, this is what the picture looks like. We have large numbers of young people, 6.5 million young people. That's a third of youth between the ages of 18 and 34. They're spatially very distant from where the opportunities are. So even if you did find a job in a metro, that taxi fare would cost you a third of your salary. And when you look at the first economy, who are they hiring? What are they hiring? They're not hiring from this youth pool. Okay. So this is the stickiness of the problem. It's not something that's going to disappear if we get a little bit of economic growth, and that also doesn't look particularly likely. So here's the problem. This is what we need to get on with fixing. We took the opportunity to speak at the Finance Indaba because the people who come here hold the purse strings. And the people holding the purse strings make very important decisions. And I want to start talking about how important those decisions are for finance people to consider in the long term from a country cost perspective. Just a little wake-up call. The first big cost is the cost to business from security issues, from having an unstable country. Our unemployment rate for youth is double Tunisia's before the uprising, the Arab Spring. So when this plays out on television, we should not look surprised. We should not be horrified. If you are a young person with absolutely no prospects, how else do you show your feelings? What else do you do? There are very few pathways to make yourself heard. And here's something I know Finance Indaba will be interested in. If we start to look at our tax base, 80% of personal income tax is paid by 3% of the population. And 480,000 people contribute to 61% of personal income tax. This is simply not sustainable. So this is a number that comes from SAICA, but there are a few sources for this. It looks at the cost to the economy of an unemployed person over a lifetime. And this is quite a conservative estimate. An unemployed person, now this is an important number because I'm going to carry this through a set of calculations. So we can just start to think big picture here in terms of why it's everybody's problem to get youth into work. If we take that 1.2 million, the cost of an unemployed person, and we take the 6.5 million number, the number of unemployed youth, the cost to the economy is 7.8 trillion if we don't get unemployed youth into work. Our GDP is 4.8 trillion. Okay, now the sustainability of this hopefully gets through to you. If we were to start employing youth the way we do in the Youth Employment Service, the way we've been putting youth to work, the cost to get them through a program like Yes, 6.5 million is 305 billion. Can we just repeat those numbers? 7.8 trillion versus 305 billion. Eskom's debt, 450 billion. For less than that, we can get every young unemployed person into a job for a year. Why a year? If you have 1 year in a work experience and you generate a quality CV and a quality reference letter, I feel like this guy's competing with me. I feel like as I get louder, he's getting louder. If we put that young person into a job for a year, the CV and reference letter increases the likelihood of a callback at a subsequent job interview by 3 times. Here's the kicker for women. If a woman comes with a good reference letter, she is likely to get a job. It doubles the likelihood of a job within 3 months of job search. These are powerful statistics. What it tells us is that if a young woman is de-risked by someone saying she has a lovely attitude to work, she's willing to learn, she will get that job. They just need that de-risking experience, and it changes their lives. Here it is one more time. 7.8 trillion is the cost of saying no. 305 billion is the cost of saying yes. Now let's take this back to Yes. So Yes comes out of the CEO initiative. As you were told, we're here to create thousands of jobs and put youth into work. And we've been doing that. This is the past 10 months at Yes. From 0 jobs to 25,470 jobs yesterday. And this is in an economy where between quarter 1 and quarter 2, Stats SA tells us we dropped 216,000 jobs. Thank you. And the stories are coming back from all over the country every day of these youth that are in these jobs. And the companies are raving about them. There are youth who just needed to show you what they could do. I'll give you one or two examples a little later of what these youth are doing. They're bringing energy, they're bringing innovation, they're bringing inspiration into these businesses. So here's the number again. We like to show off with it. 25,470 lives changed. What if we didn't do? What if Yes hadn't come about and we didn't create these 25,000 jobs? The cost to the economy would have been 30 billion. This is just what we saved the economy in the last 10 months. It cost us 1.2 billion with salaries for those entire years for the 25,470 jobs. And guess what? If we're clever about these jobs, so let's take Nedbank. Nedbank's one of our biggest clients. Nedbank did 3,340 jobs. How many of those jobs do you think are sitting inside Nedbank in their own infrastructure? There's probably about 50, maybe about 50 or 80. Where we've placed those jobs is through implementation partners across the country. And it's tied in to what Nedbank likes to do, which is get involved in conservation projects, in green economy projects. Those youth are placed across provinces through implementation partners, in recycling programs, rhino protection programs. My favorite job is we have whale watchers. Okay, that's an actual job, people, and it's an important one. And we have Yes Youth in those. So if you look at the footprint of where Yes salaries are going across the country, we've got them going into Mpumalanga, where unemployment rates are 43.5%. We've got them going into rural KwaZulu-Natal, unemployment rates are 42.1%. So we're really trying to spread this footprint through clever design. The salaries of these youth are over $1 billion going into local economies through those salaries. So you can imagine the difference that this is making in the villages and little towns where these youth are employed. Now, what if you all walked out of this room understanding the importance of making rational decisions with our economy, not discounting our future? What if you walked out of here and became ambassadors to help us reach the 1 million jobs that we want to get to? If you were to do that, this would be the impact. If 1 million youth remain unemployed and we don't reach these targets, it is going to cost us 1.2 trillion. If you walk out of here and spread this task amongst all the people you know, anybody who has the privilege of being able to give a job helps us create that job. At entry-level salary, 3,500 Rand, most businesses can afford that. If we get to the 1 million with you, it'll cost us 47 billion as Business SA. That's a doable number. The cost of leaving people unemployed is not doable for South Africa or for South African business. And these numbers are underplayed. Because if we are to put young people into these jobs, there is an amazing multiplier effect. What the economists tell us is if you give young people jobs in low-income communities, they spend that 3,500 in their local community. When that money gets spent at the top, it doesn't circulate. And so for every 5% drop in the unemployment rate, we add 1% to GDP. These are powerful multiplier effects, and we create them by putting these young people into work. So this is just the explanation. This is a paper done by a visiting fellow at WITS called Lawrence. And this is how we build. We hear a lot about inclusive economic participation. We do not and will not have an inclusive economy if we continue to leave a third of the youth population behind and locked out of the economy. We have to get people into work. Actually, the returns on tertiary education in cross-country studies have told us tertiary education gives you the lowest returns. The best returns to reduce inequality and grow this economy is get more people into work, and they will learn by doing. So, here are a couple of reasons, and I will run through them on why you should say yes. Inequality and unemployment is not going to sort itself out. We have to get involved with thought-through plans, and that means all of us. Citizenship is not a spectator sport in this country. You are not a manager in Denmark or Sweden where everything works. You are a manager in South Africa. You've got to take decisions at country level in order for your company to thrive. We can stop the slide to junk status if we show improvements in our employment rates. For those of you that want something back, guess what? If you invest in these youth jobs, you can get a BEE level up, or you can get 2 BEE levels up, so we've got to give back. We've got a legislation, it's in the Yes Gazette, that says companies who invest in a certain number of jobs move up that scorecard, and it's working. We already have over 45 companies that have benefited from 1 and 2 levels up on the scorecard. Right, so you get something back. We need to create these new future taxpayers. We've looked at the tax-paying base in South Africa, which is very low. This is my favorite one. Slightly different for the finance people in the room. This also matters. The secret to happiness. Does anybody know what the secret to happiness is? This is from the neuroscience literature. Your happy centers in your brain, he's saying coffee. The happy centers in your brain light up if you give. This is science, people. This is what makes human beings happy, is giving, altruism. And there's lots of ways to give. What I'm going to play is a very quick video. It's our Yes Hub in Tembisa. We've got 2 strategies. One is companies register, commit to jobs, and we place them all over the country. The other is to create infrastructure to stimulate small business development, to create oases of knowledge in the heart of communities where mothers don't have to leave their kids for the entire day. They can walk over to the center. Entrepreneurs can get help with their small businesses. It's a mixed cross-pollination, multi-sector space where there's lots of activity going on. And I'll play you a little video so that you can see we've got sanitary pad production, we've got urban farming with high technology aquaponics. We're exporting organic lettuce from Tembisa, and we're going to be doing baby spinach quite soon, and we do micro herbs. You're going to see computer classes and small businesses starting up in the tech space. We've got a range of activities. Can you guys play the video for me? Thanks.
I always feel wherever I am on this continent that the community around me provides a life that is enriching and is rooted in the simplest things. It's moments like today and meeting all of you that inspire us. Yes!
So what you see at the facility are 13 young ladies from the community. We recruit from the community. They're in a sanitary pad production line. That business is going to be owned by them. Just after they finish their yes year, they'll get an interest-free loan to be able to pay back the business. We're going to start these Yes Hubs at 100 sites across the country. Our Alex and Mpumalanga sites will be ready in March of next year. The Mpumalanga site is just outside Bushbuck Ridge, between Bushbuck Ridge and the park, and a lot of the flagship programs that you see here will take place there, but on a much bigger scale, because we've got bigger land for farming. But our farmers like Moss, and you saw Moss has got 25 other urban farmers who are working with him and learning how to do high yield, high nutrition, organic production using technology, and it's all water safe. The water is reused in the system, and the plants are fed by fish water. So it's all very high tech, which makes these businesses competitive. So it's not just about doing conventional enterprise development. It's can we also take the best technologies to make these businesses competitive? And this is where we're going to actually drive the long-term big numbers on jobs. You saw all the brands operating there. We're taking money from Sanlam, Investec. You saw the list, Nedbank. We're taking it into these communities, and we're turning it into enterprise development initiatives that just keep generating jobs and spills over into the small businesses in the community. The sanitary pad production, these are fully compostable. It's the second cheapest sanitary pad on the township shelf, and it's a really beautiful, comfortable, workable product, high quality product. And this is just Moss and some of the farmers working with him. So what you saw there was the pooled investment of a whole lot of companies. The 25,000 jobs number that you see is 340 companies registered that have created those jobs. If you work together, we can have amplified impact. Rather than working in silos where we replicate all the administrative structures, Yes is a platform NGO that allows multiple companies to get much bigger bang for buck. And if we work together, we can leverage not just the resources, but also the IP that comes from a crowd. So this is what we're trying to unlock. This is what we hear from youth every day. I can't get a job without experience, and I can't get experience without a job. That first job takes them out of the cycle, which can be quite debilitating psychologically. Give youth that all-important chance to show the world what they can do. This is a Volkswagen youth. His name is Vuyani Henry. Vuyani was unemployed. He did have a matric certificate. VW created 570 jobs with Yes. Vuyani was placed in one of the dealerships in Paarl. He didn't want to stand. You know how those dealership guys go out for a smoke every 10 minutes? You know the type. He said, no, I'm not going to stay with these old guys. I'm going to go into the community on the weekend. I was in the market for a car recently, true story. I could not get to a dealership because they close on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday. And Vuyani said, well, working people, this is what happens. He went to Stokvel groups, he went to church groups, he took the credit forms with him, held people's hand, took them for credit checks. This young man sold 3 cars. Was it in his first 3 months on the job? So you can imagine, in addition to his salary, what that commission did for him. And the dealership owner is like telling VW, why can't you get our other guys to behave like this, to break their patterns and just try a little bit of innovation to sell these cars? Guys, this is a summary slide. If you look at the gray bars, it's GDP. If you look at the green line, that is company earnings. Your company earnings, you can see from this graph, is linked to GDP growth. If our country is not doing well, it is very hard for your company to do well. No country, no company. And so, if these numbers are not making sense, please understand very basically, the cost of saying no to youth jobs is the cost of your future. And when we see this, it is a choice we are actively making as citizens and the owners of this economy every day. We are saying you can go that way, or we're giving people a pathway like Vuyani to be able to show you what he can do. There's a story I'd like to end with, and it's a story of Dan Ariely. He's a behavioral economist, and they do all sorts of experiments with consumers. And so a group of academics in California created a jam stand in a few retail stores. And one of the jam stands in one of the stores had 24 different varieties of jam, colors and flavors. And people flocked to the stands. They had lots of visitors. But when it translated into sales, it was only 3% of the people who visited translated into sales. Guys, when they had a stand with 6 jam types, it converted into sales with 30% of the people who visited the stand. Now, this is one of the irrational behaviors. When we're presented with all of that choice, we're not sitting there with a calculator and deciding which jam to buy. Actually, what happens to us is the complexity paralyzes us. When we are faced with a whole range of complex problems, our human nature is to say, I'll just stick with what I do. I'll have my woolly strawberry jam that I always have. I'm not going to experiment with anything new. And this is what we are doing in South Africa. The complexity and the size of the problems, we're stepping away from this. We're not stepping in. And we have to break these habits. Jams are not complex, and yet people won't buy them when they see 24. So you can imagine what's happening in our country. If we don't overcome this fear of change and fixing things, we're going to be stuck here. So please, as the finance people, this is the finance Indaba, can we ask you to make the rational choice and understand that the cost of saying no is unaffordable. It will cripple us. It will bring us to our knees. We all want to look, well, I don't want to look like him, but I know some of you do. Okay. We want to achieve this physique. As a country, we want to get to peak performance, but we keep making the bad decisions around what we do with our money. We're fixing short-term problems. There was an amazing book that I've been reading, Atomic Habits, and they look at a certain species in our history, and they kept worrying about predators, and they learned how to sleep in trees. And actually what killed that species was some kind of gastrointestinal bug. But this is what we do. We are focusing on short-term problems and issues. Climate change, the gastrointestinal bug, these youth that we are locking out. If we don't break the habit, if we don't break our complacency, if we don't step up, that's going to be our lot. There's a poem from Robert Frost. You guys are not being very kind to me, hey? So there's a poem from Robert Frost called The Road Not Taken, and it's quite a cliche. This poem, you've all heard it. And the part of the poem that most people quote is the road less traveled by. But the part of the poem that I want to bring to your attention is not which is the road less traveled by. The line in the poem is, it's important that I make the right choice because I'm not going to get to this intersection point again. Once you follow a path, once you go down it, coming back that way is not easy. Shall I give up, guys? I really do want to read that line. Here we go. Yet knowing how the way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. We're at this critical juncture where we're not going to be able to come back to this point. There are still things we can do immediately to stop what's going to happen in the future. I started with a slide on a pear-shaped economy. This is our reality. We can be peachy if you just say yes.